Welcome to the deep dive. So, you've sent us your sources, and we're here to dig into them, pull out the key stuff.
That's the idea.
Today, we've got something pretty interesting. A whole load of YouTube reaction videos.
Right, and these aren't just any videos. They show people from all over reacting to online posts, stories, about interactions with Americans.
Yeah, specifically focusing on moments of, well, what some people are calling confident ignorance. Our job today is to try and unpack see the patterns, maybe think about where it comes from.
It's a fascinating approach, actually, because you're not just looking at the original statement, but the reaction to the statement gives you layers.
Exactly. Layers of perception, misunderstanding, all that. Okay, so let's dive in. One big theme that jumped out was this kind of nationalistic misconception.
Mm-hmm.
We saw a lot of reactions to this one claim. No nation has ever existed much beyond 250 years.
No.
Clearly linked to the U.S. hitting 250 soon.
Right, in 2025. And the online reactions, well, they were pretty strong, as you'd expect.
You can imagine. I mean, people pointing out pubs older than that, let alone countries.
And what's really striking there isn't just, the basic factual error. I mean, ancient Rome, Egypt, China, take your pick.
Sure.
It's maybe the mindset behind it. It feels very focused on the present, almost erasing the huge sweep of history elsewhere.
That's a good way to put it. And it kind of connects to another one we saw, this belief that the U.S. military could, quote, take on the world at the same time and win.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
And the kicker, we simply choose not to conquer them. The reaction, mostly disbelief, some outright laughter.
Well, yeah. I mean, thinking about that claim, it's less about a literal military assessment maybe, and more about a cultural narrative. This idea of exceptionalism, maybe dominance.
Right, like national identity tied up with perceived power.
Exactly. Even if it seems pretty detached from actual global politics. Some called it egotistical, even maniacal.
Yeah, those words came up. Then there were the claims that were just factually off.
Yeah.
Like America's the reason you have cars.
Ugh. The car one. The internet had a field day with that, pointing to Carl Benz Germany.
Of course. Which makes you ask, why say something so definitively wrong when the facts are, like, a quick search away?
That's a really good question. Maybe it comes down to relying on sort of ingrained stories or national myths rather than checking, existing beliefs being stronger than easily found evidence.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, geography.
Oh, boy. There were some significant gaps there.
Big time. People unable to point to countries on a map, mistaking whole continents for countries, Africa, Asia.
And the default to Africa was noticeable, wasn't it? When asked for any country, just Africa.
Yeah, it suggests maybe a very broad strokes view of the world map.
Or perhaps a lack of detailed geographical education, maybe exposure. In today's world, that basic map knowledge feels pretty important.
You'd think so. And it wasn't just far off places. Someone apparently put Europe in Canada.
Right. Or the person who'd never heard of Oklahoma and placed it next to California.
Wow. It does make you wonder about the focus within U.S. geography lessons, perhaps. More internal focus.
It could suggest that, yeah. Maybe less emphasis on placing the U.S. within the wider global context?
Even closer to home, there was confusion. Alaska. The idea you'd need Alaskan money.
Or needing to exchange currency for Canada, despite, the massive border and economic ties.
It's surprising, right? It really points to maybe a very localized understanding of how things work, even with neighbors.
Definitely underscores that.
Okay, then there were the cultural awareness things.
Yeah.
Some real head scratchers in the reaction videos.
Mm-hmm.
Like genuine surprise that other countries have universal health care.
Right, and that question linking it to people jumping off of stuff like idiots, that quite...
Wasn't it just, where does that connection even come from?
Well, it seems to tie universal health care to this idea of maybe reduced personal responsibility, which likely comes from specific cultural or political debates within the U.S., different ideas about the state versus the individual.
I see. Okay, and then the classic, soccer is the correct term.
Ah, yes, football versus soccer.
Insisting on soccer when pretty much the entire rest of the world calls it football. It's a small thing, but...
But it speaks volumes, doesn't it, about linguistic perspective. Insisting your word is correct against the vast majority. It shows maybe a limited awareness of global norms.
Yeah, and food expectations, too. Pizza.
Ranch dressing.
Expecting pizza to always come with ranch and be pre-cut in Europe, and treating Europe like it's one single country with one pizza standard.
That lack of flexibility is key, isn't it? When you encounter something different, expecting it just like home, and being disappointed, it suggests maybe not being open to local ways.
Right, and sports again, the Super Bowl. Total shock that it wasn't a huge deal in Europe.
And that dismissive comment comparing it to cricket.
Which is ironic, because cricket has a massive global following, way bigger than American football, just not necessarily in America.
Exactly, it shows a blind spot. The Super Bowl is huge culturally in the U.S., but globally, not on the same scale as, say, the World Cup. Dismissing cricket just highlights that narrow view of what's popular internationally.
Definitely. We also saw confusion between Georgia the country and Georgia the U.S. state.
A common one, perhaps.
Seems like it. And the assumption that basically everyone online is American or in the U.S.
Yeah, that default assumption.
Or being surprised that it can be winter in the U.S. and summer in, say, Brazil, like basic seasons.
It all adds up, doesn't it? These little things collectively paint a picture of a somewhat US-centric frame of reference, maybe not always considering the planet's diversity.
Even tiny things like assuming traffic lights everywhere say walk and don't walk in English.
Or thinking the U.S. Constitution applies globally.
Right. That assumption of universality is a big one. Laws, signs, language, they're all local. Assuming U.S. norms are global norms, that's a fundamental misunderstanding.
It really is.
And assuming not seeing snow means you must live in Nevada or Florida, completely ignoring, most of the planet's warm climates outside the U.S.
Or being confused by the word tramway, asking if it's foreign.
Yeah, like it's some exotic concept. These things suggest maybe living in a bit of an information bubble sometime, limited exposure.
That seems plausible, a frame of reference shaped very much by one's immediate surroundings.
Okay, so the videos also had tons of anecdotes, actual interactions where these misconceptions played out.
And this is where it gets really tangible, right? Seeing the real-world impact.
Absolutely. Like asking a Canadian at the Parliament of Canada, mind you, where the American doors are.
Wow. Or assuming someone from Bosnia just speaks America.
Yeah. Or those really stereotypical, clumsy questions about Islam. These interactions just show how the bigger misunderstandings translate into awkward or offensive moments.
That Canadian example is stark as a next-door neighbor, and still that lack of basic awareness.
And it just keeps going. Telling a Canadian in California, no, you're not Canadian because we look the same.
As if nationality is purely about appearance.
Guessing Luxembourg is in the UK. Or Germany.
The hotel cashier assuming Australians don't speak English or maybe speak Australianese.
Australianese. Or the craft fair seller assuming a Canadian was selling falafel. Falafel. Maybe.
Yes. These assumptions seem based on just surface things or pure lack of knowledge. The brain tries to categorize maybe, but gets it wildly wrong.
Wildly wrong is right. Mistaking a beret for a sombrero, okay? But then asking if the wearer has a British accent because apparently there are no Mexicans in Britain.
That's quite a chain of assumptions.
Or arguing with someone from the Himalayas about how to pronounce Himalayas.
The confident.
Assuming a black student from Haiti must be from Kenya and that, quote, all Africans are the same.
That moves beyond just ignorance into really harmful stereotyping, doesn't it? Failing to see the individual, just relying on crude generalizations.
Totally. Needs respect, curiosity, not just labels. Then there was the teacher from Canada working in Florida, being told by a student that there are no cars in Canada, only sleds.
Sled in modern Canada.
Or asking people from Cote d'Ivoire and Tanzania if they have highways.
Again, that assumption of lack of development.
Seems like it. And assuming a Latina person in Florida must have had a harsh immigration experience. But she was from Puerto Rico.
A U.S. territory, which shows a lack of awareness even about U.S. territories instead.
Yeah, that's a domestic knowledge gap, too.
Yeah.
Asking someone with a clear British accent if it sounds more like Scottish.
Just lumping accents together.
The Social Security office worker, assuming a Canadian applying for their first U.S. Social Security number, must actually be American.
Even in an official setting where accuracy should matter.
Or assuming someone from the Czech Republic is Russian and speaks Russian.
That old Cold War era lumping of Eastern Europe. Still lingering, perhaps.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
How about the skate shop employee in California asking a Canadian customer if they skateboard in the snow?
Oh.
And if they live in igloos.
Serious. The igloo stereotype.
And the person completely baffled by time zone, asking why Germany didn't warn the U.S. about 9/11.
Because time zone. That reveals a pretty profound misunderstanding of, well, time and geography, and maybe history.
You think? Repeatedly calling someone of Pakistani origin Arab.
Different regions, different cultures.
Asking someone from the UK if they have pizza.
Pizza. In the UK. Groundbreaking stuff.
Then the grocery store incident, a passport, an official international document.
Yeah.
Not being accepted as valid ID.
Because it wasn't a U.S. driver's license, presumably.
Seems like it. Asking someone from Ireland if they celebrate Christmas.
Okay.
Or Thanksgiving and Halloween.
American holidays being exported mentally.
Maybe. It's just sheer shock at meeting a black person from England.
As if that's impossible. Again, that narrow, stereotypical view of what people from certain countries.
Right. Assuming Morocco would have fireworks for the 4th of July.
Why would they?
Exactly. Asking someone from Korea or the Philippines if they eat mangoes and bananas every day and live in huts.
Just straight up offensive stereotypes from decades ago.
Asking a Canadian, point blank, where are you ethnically from? Right after they said they were from Canada.
Confusing nationality and ethnicity, a very common point of confusion, it seems.
It does. The tour guest, grilling an Indian tour guide. Why were you allowed in school? And asking about arranged marriage.
So intrusive, based on stereotypes.
Complimenting someone from Nigeria on speaking perfect English.
That backhanded compliment, right? Like, it's surprising they speak the official language of their country well.
Yeah. The Spanish student's paper claiming Americans eat fast food for every single meal.
A stereotype going the other way, perhaps, based on media.
Could be. Border patrol confusion, nationality versus ethnicity again, and thinking Portugal is a city in Spain.
In a border patrol context, that lack of basic geography is concerning there.
Mistaking Australia and Argentina. Something about chinchillas. Bit random, that one.
Okay.
Asking if Bob Dylan was one of the Beatles.
Musically?
Yeah.
No. Geographically? Also no.
The flight attendant, who just couldn't believe there are direct flights from Mexico City to Lisbon.
Why not? Major hub.
Assuming Asian just means Indian.
That huge, diverse continent reduced to one country.
Stereotyping Hispanic people as only caring about music, food, and sex.
Reducing an entire diverse group to crude cliches. Awful.
Asking someone from India how they get around if they have cars, followed by the inevitable elephant question.
Oh, the elephant question still. It shows such an outdated, almost colonial view.
And being surprised that Ecuador has, houses and neighborhoods.
Basic infrastructure being a surprise.
Accusing someone in Australia of gaslighting them simply for pointing out the time difference.
Wow. Defensiveness when faced with a simple fact.
Asking someone from Denmark if it's in Chicago.
Denmark, Chicago. Right.
The horribly insensitive comment with the Philippines being messed up by floods because of overpopulation, just no empathy, linking tragedy to a simplistic, judgmental cause.
That's really rough.
Asking a Hawaiian person if they speak good for a Hawaiian.
Hawaii being a U.S. state where English is standard.
Yeah. Asking if it's July in Brazil because it's December in the U.S. seasons again.
Opposite hemispheres, opposite seasons, basic stuff.
And those elaborate but totally impossible travel plans someone shared, like hitchhiking across Africa in a few days.
Just showing a complete lack of grasp of distance, geography, logistic, reality, really.
So, yeah. Wrapping this deep dive up, it feels like we saw this mix, right? This kind of national pride, sometimes leading to factual errors.
Right. Coupled with some really significant gaps in just basic world knowledge, geography, culture.
And then all those personal stories, the interactions, often quite culturally insensitive, really stemming from that lack of wider knowledge.
Definitely. And it's important to say, again, the point isn't about shaming anyone. It's about seeing these patterns of misconception.
Yeah, understanding the landscape. Maybe highlighting where a bit more curiosity or learning could, enrich perspectives.
Hopefully, yes. Recognizing these things might encourage that ongoing learning about the world.
Exactly. Which leads us to a final thought for you, the listener. How does getting more exposure to different viewpoints, to accurate information, how does that change things? Not just for one person's understanding, but maybe for being a better global citizen.
It's a good question. Thinking about our own potential blind spots, perhaps, and the value of keeping that learning process going, the world is complex and fascinating.
Definitely something to chew on.